Hello everyone, welcome to another new video learning Windows PowerShell in our channel Telugulo Telusko. In this video we are going to talk about variables. Variables are one of the important concepts in Windows PowerShell, and it's worth spending some time to understand what variables are and how they behave, because we'll be dealing a lot with variables in PowerShell scripting. So let's go ahead and understand what variables are. So a variable is a unit of memory in which values are stored, which means you can just think of a variable like a folder on your computer. So in your folder you normally keep your documents and files. Similar to that, a variable is a space of memory in which you will store some sort of information. In PowerShells, variables are represented by text strings that begins with a $sign, which means all variables are prefixed by a $sign, and then you can give whatever the name that you want for your variable. For example, in this particular instance, the variable name is A. It is not $A, it is A. Dollar is used to represent that A is a variable. Again, in this example we have process, the variable name, and it is not $sign process because dollar is used to represent that process is a variable. Another example right here, my underscore var. So as you can see, a variable can be a single digit or a multiple character in length, or it can also have a special characters like underscore. So you can create variables in whatever the way you want, but always ensure that your variable, whatever you're creating, is prefixed with a $sign. Only then PowerShell treats that as a variable. And then variable names are not case sensitive. So if you're not aware, PowerShell by default is a case insensitive language, which means until and unless you explicitly specify the case sensitivity, PowerShell is not going to actually treat any case sensitivity into picture. So by default PowerShell is a case insensitive language. So if you create a variable with a lowercase a, and you can also call with an uppercase a, so it doesn't really matter because PowerShell treats variables and anything else in case insensitive by default. And then variable names can also include spaces and special characters, but these are really difficult to use and should be avoided. I'm going to demonstrate how you can create a variable using spaces and special characters. It is important for you to understand because probably when you go ahead and look for some code on the internet, and some people are tend to use these spaces and special characters in their variables, so you should be able to understand what they are actually referring to. So with that, if we see the types of variables, similarly to what we have seen in the aliases, there are user created variables and automatic variables and preference variables. So let's go ahead and understand one by one. So user created variables are created and maintained by the user and exist only within that PowerShell session, and as soon as you close your PowerShell window, variables are gone. Similar to aliases, so whenever you create an alias, it works in that PowerShell console, it runs in that own memory space. The information is not shared with any other PowerShell console, even though if you have simultaneously open multiple PowerShell consoles. So the variable is indeed in that PowerShell memory and it cannot be shared, and as soon as you close the PowerShell window, the variables are gone. So it is created by and maintained by the user itself. So those are the user created variables. And then we have something called as automatic variables. So similar to how we have built-in aliases, there are some built-in variables as well within PowerShell. So these are called as automatic variables, or you can also call it as built-in variables, whatever the name you are comfortable with. Automatic variables store the state of Windows PowerShell. It is going to store some information related or with respect to Windows PowerShell in that particular variable, and these are maintained by PowerShell itself. So you have no authority to go ahead and change those informations, because it is going to change the system state or the PowerShell state itself. So you don't need to mess around with this particular automatic variable. These are created and maintained by the Windows PowerShell itself to maintain their accuracy, and users cannot change the variable values. Those are the automatic variables for you. And then the preference variables store user preferences. So these variables are created by Windows PowerShell, and by default it has some default values which is on the safer side, but user can go ahead and always change those preference variables, and you have the ability to do so. So with that said, we are going to see some of the automatic and preference variables in the next slide. So user created variables are something that are created by you, so they are unique from user to user. So I don't have any examples of how user variable exists, but I can demonstrate that while we are creating variables. So these are dynamic, which means it differs from user to user on whatever the basis they create those variables. But automatic variables and preference variables are standard. Here you cannot change the values, but here you can change the values, but the variable name itself will remain the same. So let's go ahead and see some of the automatic variables and preference variables. So $home, so the variable name is home here, it is not $home. $sign represents that home is a variable. Home is a variable. And then host is a variable. I can say that because it has a $sign before. And then null is a variable. So $home contains the user's home directory, and $null contains no value, a variable with no value, which is an empty variable. And I'm going to show you why we are going to use $null. $profile is going to show you the profile path for the variable, and $PS version table is going to show the versioning information of the current PowerShell that you're running. For example, version 4, version 5, version 3. $PWD, the print working directory, it is going to show you in what path you are in. For example, C Windows System 32 or C temp. And then there are some preferences variables. So these are something you cannot change. These are something, automatic variables are something you cannot change. But there are some other variables which you can play with, which are preference variables. So a preference variable, I have a variable called error action preference, and I have another variable which is confirm preference, and then verbose preference, what if preference, maximum history count, and maximum error count. So by default they have some value. So PowerShell defines some values by default for these variables, but a user can obviously go ahead and change the values of these variables, and they can make suit their needs. So let's understand these variables one by one by going into a demonstration, and then we understand much better in context what these variables are. So let's go ahead and first create some user defined variables. So at any given point of time, if you want to see what are the existing variables in your PowerShell console, always type the command get variable. So it is going to show me all the existing variable. As you can see, $PS home. So if you see here, the variable itself does not have a $sign. The name is just PS home, and it's PS script root, it's not $PS script root. Because I emphasize on this point a lot, because a lot of people tend to make that mistake calling the variable with the $sign, which is indeed incorrect. And as you can see, these are some of the built-in variables which comes with PowerShell. So, and then if I go ahead and create one variable, so a variable can be always created with a $sign, and then you can give whatever name you want, and then this variable should have some value. So the value is, for example, get process. So when I create this variable and I go ahead and call whatever you want, I get the process list. So this particular variable that I have created is a memory space in which I'm storing this information. So whenever I call or execute that memory space, whatever the value has in it, that value will be executed and get the output onto the console. And then variable can also be created with a special sign underscore, and I can give var proc, for example, and then I can give get process, and when I run $var underscore proc, so I'm executing whatever inside the var underscore proc, that is get process. So when I call $var underscore proc, I'm calling the inside value. If I go ahead and type var underscore proc without the dollar sign, it doesn't know what to do. So var underscore proc is not recognized as a commandlet function or a script file. So please try again. So that's the error message. Now if I go ahead and see get variable right now, so whatever the variables that I have created, so here we go, var underscore proc. As you can see, there is no dollar sign there, and also I have created one more whatever somewhere here, whatever name you want. So it's going to call the system.diagnostic process. We'll talk about those type names later, but it's essentially is gets process on my computer. Now variables with spaces. Generally you cannot create a variable with spaces taking this approach. For example, hello there, and if I give it a value, how are you? So if you see here, I get an approach. If I get an error stating that variables cannot be taken with a space right here, because space is not treated as a legal character in a variable name using this approach, using the dollar sign approach generally. So the only things that are supported using this approach is you can give whatever the string name that you want completely, or you can use an underscore and then give it a name, and that means I can create hello underscore there or hello underscore there underscore how equals to I can give it a value are you. This is again illegal, so I can call that variable and then there we go, I get the value. But if you want to include spaces within your variables, there is a different approach that you need to take. So you need to let me just 1 second, let me just open up PowerShell console again. So you need to take a different approach, which is dollar sign with an open and a closed curly brace, and then you can give hello there and how are you. This is a variable name, so I can give it a value, for example get service. When I hit enter, I can call that variable. I need to call the complete variable. Fortunately we have tab completion, so you don't need to type everything. So when I run that, I get the complete list of services on my computer. So that's how we create variables with spaces and special characters in between. So this is completely legal way of doing it. In fact, there is a lot of code that is written in PowerShell takes this approach of dollar sign with an open and curly brace for declaring variables. You might tend to see a lot of people using that online as well. So when you want to use someone's code and modify it, you need to know what exactly they are referring to using this dollar sign open and closed curly brace. So this is how you create variables with spaces. Finally, there is one way of creating a user defined variable, that is using the complete syntax that provided by PowerShell using new variable. So this is a commandlet, so I can give it a name hello. So if you take a look here, I'm creating a variable name called hello. I'm not using a dollar sign in this particular case, right? When you did a dollar sign a var equals to some 1 2 3, Var doesn't mean anything to PowerShell. So when you precede that using a dollar sign, then PowerShell understands that this is a variable that you need to create in PowerShell. But when you use the official syntax new variable, there is no need for you to again say to PowerShell that you are creating a variable. PowerShell automatically understand using this commandlet whatever you are doing is creating a new variable, so you don't need to precede the name with a dollar sign. Now you can give it a value which is hey, for example, hey there, and when I hit enter, a variable with name hello is created, and I can call that variable and I get whatever the value is within that variable. So this is one of the neat approaches that you can take in terms of using the complete syntax with parameters. It avoids confusion, it makes things clear. So those are the three ways using which you can create variables within PowerShell. And now there are some things that we need to discuss, which is automatic variables and preference variables. So if I go ahead and see what is there in $home, it is going to give me the home directory of the current user who is logged in. And again, $ps version table. So it is going to give me the value for the version of PowerShell. $null interestingly doesn't have anything, it's an empty variable. So there are specific cases in which we use $null. So when we start writing our own scripts, we will be using $null to actually check a condition whether a particular variable has some input in it or it is an empty variable. So we can use $null to treat that scenarios. Again, if you go back and see what exactly we have, $profile, for example, $profile is going to give you the complete path for your profile script location. So this is where my PowerShell profile script is actually present. So we didn't really speak about anything on profile scripts. We will be talking about profile scripts in a later video, but this is how you actually find the path for your profile script. So if you are creating a profile script, you need to save that script in this particular path. And then $pwd prints working directory. So currently I'm working in the directory C Windows System 32, as you can see right here. So that's what it gets printed. So if you want to know more about automatic variables, go ahead and type help about underscore. This is a concept in PowerShell, right? Automatic variables is a concept, so you need to look for the conceptual based help, as we spoke in the PowerShell help system video about automatic variables. And when you hit enter, you get a lot of good documentation. So as you can see, there are $sign, which is a variable to see the last token that is invoked, and then there is a question mark to get me the last operation status. So what it means is, for example, if I open another PowerShell session, if I say test connection is nothing but your ping command. Normally ping command does a test to the local host is failed for some reason. So that's fine. So I got an error here. So let's go ahead and see what is there in $underscore. So $underscore is getting me an information which says false because the last execution is failed. So I missed a name here, local host, and missed an alphabet. So when I do this now, I get a ping result back. So when I go ahead and see what is there in $underscore, now I have it true, which means the execution of the last command is successful. So I got the value true. Here the execution of my last command has been failed, so I got the output as false. So this is one of the automatic variables that you can use, contains the execution status of the last operation. And there are a lot of other different automatic variables. So we'll be talking about $underscore pretty soon, and there is also $PS item, so which we'll be talking about pretty soon when we start writing our scripts. Now we have something called as preference variables. So a preference variable normally has some value in it by default. So if you can see here, there are a couple of preference variables which are error action preference, which means what I need to do. PowerShell is actually storing some information what I need to do if I encounter an error, right? And then there is a confirm preference which actually is going to ask you for the confirmation. Are you sure you want to execute this? Are you sure you want to execute this? And then there is a verbose preference you can actually turn on or turn off, and then it is turned off by default, so you can turn it on. And there is a what if preference, there is a maximum history count, there is a maximum error count. So let's play with one of them. Confirm preference, let's go ahead and see how confirm preference works. So normally what does a confirm preference does? Well, a confirm preference, so for example, when I say get service, I don't get any confirmation whether I need to execute this or not, but I can use get service using what if or confirm parameters. And then I can also do something called as adjustment to this automatic variable which is confirm preference. So currently if I go ahead and see what is the value within the confirm preference variable, which is high. So this is how it works. So high doesn't mean it will ask confirmation for everything. So in PowerShell there are commandlets, right? In commandlets, and then there are functions, and there are some scripts. So what it means is each and every commandlet or function or script has some risk appetite, which means when I run get commandlets, potentially I'm not changing any system state, so they are safe to run. So they are low preferenced or low risk appetite commandlets. For example, remove is actually deleting some files, so there are some high or medium risk appetite commands. Again, each and every commandlet, function and scripts are categorized into what you called as high risk, low risk and medium risk. So which means when I keep the confirm preference to high, it says that only when I do or execute a commandlet or a function or a script which has high risk appetite, only prompt me the confirmation for those. If I'm running normal low risk appetite commands, don't confirm or don't ask me the confirmation. So now if I go ahead and change this confirm preference to, for example, something low, oops, I need to use double quotes or single quotes on both the ends. So low. Now if I go ahead and see the confirm preference is low. Now if, for example, if I want to stop a service name bits, can you see that prompt? It says the service, this particular action is going to stop a service. So do you want to confirm that? Press yes, right? Normally if I change back this confirm preference to high, right, confirm preference to high, for the same command stop service name bits, it doesn't ask me for any confirmation, because it might be categorized as, this commandlet might be categorized as a low risk appetite or a medium risk appetite. So when my confirmation preference is set to high, I don't get a confirmation prompt for low and medium preference commandlets. I get prompt for only high risk appetite commandlets. So when I want to test that, I just change the confirmation preference to low so that I get confirmation preference for each and every type of risk appetite for each and every commandlet, which means stop service is potentially stopping some service, though the risk appetite is low. As my confirmation is preference is set to low, I am going to get a confirm prompt. So this is how the variable is going to, these are called as preference variables. So there is another preference variable that you can play with, which is actually $sign error action preference. So the error action preference is set to continue at this point. What it means is when you are running multiple lines of script, for example, if you encounter an error at line 2, what should I do? Whether I need to proceed with line 3, line 4, line 5, or do I need to stop the execution? do I need to stop the execution. So here so when PowerShell encounters an error at line 2, it is going to check the value whatever it is there in the error action preference. So the error action preference says go ahead, continue. So it will continue with the rest of the script. So if I change this value to anything else, the error action preference is going to actually for example, error action preference is silently continue is one of the option that you can set, which means don't show me any error in the foreground. Right now I changed the error action preference to silently continue, which means normally if when I run multiple lines of code, when I encounter error at 2, PowerShell throws an error on the console with red text, and then it will go ahead and come and see what is there in error action preference. It says continue, okay, then it will go with line 3, line 4. But when I set the variable to silently continue, when the error occurs right here, PowerShell will not throw any error on the console. Instead, it will silently go ahead and check what is there in this variable. So it says silently continue, and then it's go ahead and execute the rest of the code. So this is how the preference variables can be adjusted, and we have seen what are the user defined variables, what are automatic variables, and then what are preference variables. User can create his own variables using the 3 approaches that I've shown you. And do remember that whatever the variables that you create in a user session, as soon as you close the PowerShell window, the variables are going to be demolished. They are not going to exist any longer. Again, as we spoke in alias session, you can always document your variables in profile scripts as you do with alias. So you will get the variables automatically loaded into your PowerShell console every time when you launch a new PowerShell console. So these are the variables for you. So one of the important topics to understand within PowerShell, as we are going to deal with these variables a lot in coming days. So that's it for this video, and if you like this video, please do like and share and subscribe to my channel. It will encourage me to do more and more videos for you. Thank you and have a wonderful day.